Welcome, everybody. So
No, but I will.
we're going to talk a little bit about faith and faith changes and relationships and go through several questions that were submitted. You know, very often there is this deep anxiety and fear around what's happening if your relationship to faith is shifting or your relationship to the church is shifting. And because of how we've often been thought to think about faith and think about what it is to be righteous or what it is to be good, this can be very, very disruptive to our sense of self, to our sense of God. It also can be very disruptive in relationships because and I'll explain some of this, but because so much of our faith, not just as in Latter-day Saints, but in any faith community, there is a sense of collective belief that everyone depends upon. Like if we can all agree on the same ideas and we can affirm those ideas together, it gives us confidence and it gives us a sense of clarity and a sense of belonging and a sense that together we can make it in this world that's full of uncertainty and anxiety. And then if somebody in that group says, hey, I don't believe this, I don't think this anymore, I think this is wrong, that can feel really disruptive, not only to our sense of confidence in our faith, if somebody's questioning it, but also just to the basic questions of, do you belong? Are you part of us or are you not a part of us? And so the issues around faith are deeply linked to the issue of differentiation. And for those of you who are new to me or haven't followed me very much, to understand what differentiation is differentiation is basically psychological maturity. But what that means is that we grow from a dependency on reinforcement from others to tell us how to think, to affirm that how we see things is the right way, that we grow out of that dependency into deeper ability to sustain our own beliefs and our own thinking and our own sense of self without the need for so much reinforcement and validation from others around us. And that's the way development goes. But when we are young in our development, which most of us actually are, okay, we're highly dependent upon approval and acknowledgement that we think the right things. And so when that starts to splinter, it really pushes us on this question of, who am I? Do I belong to the group? Do I belong to myself? Where should I stand? And a lot of the questions that have come in are very much linked to those uncertainties, those questions. And so there's nothing going wrong in these questions, even though it is a very uncomfortable process to be in. And the questions are pushing for deeper self-authorship, a deeper ability to define your life and who you are and what you believe without the same level of validation from the group. So I want to just kind of quickly, I'm working on a book, I'm finishing up a book, I'll even say, about sexuality and spirituality for Latter-day Saints. And so I talk about spiritual development kind of as sort of one of the backbone of the book, and how the way that we end up ultimately reconciling spirituality with sexuality is that the quality of both changes as we develop. And we understand that they are two sides of the same coin, right? But that's in part because our spirituality changes also as we develop and as we grow. And so just to give you, I mean, I have done other Facebook Lives on this, and so I won't spend as much time on this, but I just want to give you a little bit of a picture so you can better understand where these questions are residing in the developmental spectrum, okay? So when we first start out in life, right, we're all very, very egocentric because we don't have any other way to be in the world. And so the way that a baby or a toddler is considering moral decisions is entirely in reference to what will keep me safe. I'm small in this big world, and what do I need to do to not get in trouble, right? To have other people, be happy with me, as in, so that I will therefore feel safe and secure. And so the morality is very practical in terms of what's going to literally just keep me from get punished or having somebody be mad at me. When we get to be about age 7 or 8, we grow into the ability of being able to socially reference. And this is where we really are very proficient in mapping the minds of other people. That is to say, we can understand what people want from us, even if they're not saying, and we can track what their desires are. We can better understand our impact on other people. And we become much more aware of the question, or we become much more desirous to belong. So we're less concerned with safety in what I call stage 1. In stage 2 is the social stage, in which we become very concerned with the issue of belonging. And the way that we belong is that we adopt the beliefs and the ways of being that our group identifies with. So I remember after I was baptized at age 8, deciding I was going to bear my testimony for the first time, and walking up in front of the group, very nervous, but thinking, like, part of my desire, it was partly about an earnest belief and a desire to do what was good and what was right. But I was also borrowing from my group ideas about what it is that I should say, what it is that would demonstrate my belief in God. Now, I wasn't just strategizing, right? Because I really was trying to do what is good. And I was using what my group was telling me to understand what that is. And that's not specific to being a Latter-day Saint. That's in any group. Okay. Like, even in the town that the kids were raised in, there were just ideas within the grade school among the parents around what establishes that you're a legit person. What kind of clothing do you wear? What kind of car do you drive? What do you say about your friends and the parties you go to? Okay. Same thing. Like, there's a way in which we reference our group to tell us, how do we demonstrate that we're a good person, or we're a person that ought to belong? So this is very much what humans do. And if you think, even in politics today, people are making their decisions not so much on policy, they're making decisions on identity. This is the group I identify with. This is the group that, I just assume that I'm a part of this group because this is the group my family's a part of. This is the group and we might even think, oh, I believe these things. But it's a belief that is a default belief. It hasn't really been questioned. You haven't tolerated really the potential of stepping outside of your group identity to really look at, the ethics of those principles, or whether or not those are really principles or beliefs that you genuinely identify with. And so you see this happen in groups all the time. There's pressure in a certain way of talking, thinking, things to believe in, and you kind of collapse different ideas together because they all belong to that group, whether or not there's actual congruity between those ideas and so forth. So when you're squarely in stage 2, as most of the population is, you talk like your group talks, you believe like your group believes, even if you think they're your individual beliefs, but you haven't really tolerated looking at them individually because you are afraid of not belonging. And so that's where most of us are as Latter-day Saints. Now, the church is very good at bringing people from stage 1 into stage 2, which is a really big deal, because you can't have a functioning democracy if most of society isn't in stage 2. And by the way, when we have the information environment that we're currently in is a regressive one. It's pushing people back into stage 1, into the questions of safety and fear, and saying they're not in our group, they're a different tribe, they're not like us. And so it pushes people back into the core issues of safety and egocentrism, rather than in cooperation and working together, which is a stage 2. Stage 2 is teaching you, here's the rules. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Okay, cooperation. Everybody has a calling, right? There's principles that we align ourselves with, principles of democracy, for example, principles of Christianity in the church. They are sort of bigger than we are, and learning how to align our behavior with them allows for a group to function. Can't have a group full of egocentric people and have it stay stable. And so it's a very, very important stage to get most of the population into if you want a stable society. So very valuable, right? So institutions are very important, and they're very good at establishing the rules of the road, right? Like, the other day I passed a policeman. I was going too fast. I was thinking I could get pulled over. I didn't, but I remember thinking, if I do get pulled over and I have to pay a fine, this is maybe how I work inside of myself so I don't get depressed. I would say, I am okay with that because I value having police, and I value that there are rules that I'm also subject to, that we're all subject to, because that's the only way a society can function. And so even if I have to pay the price for breaking the rule, that's okay, because this larger good is what we all need, right? And so that's a stage 2 reality. Now, the thing is that every institution, every group, every family, every marriage, every entity that is sort of functioning in the stage 2 way has limitations. It has liabilities, it has shortcomings, it has blind spots. There is no institution, there's no church, there's no family, there's no marriage that is without fallibility, flaws, and blind spots. It's just how human beings are, and you're always going to find them. Society needs good institutions, and we need to do what we can to make our institutions function with more integrity and function better. But they are always going to be only good at helping you in this at stage 2, which is not a small thing. Okay, I'm not in any way dismissing it. I'm incredibly grateful to the church for everything it's helped me to create in my life, by having rules of the road, by having standards, by having expectations, by learning how to participate in a group, by learning how to give a talk, by learning how to teach a lesson, by teaching me about a larger goal that my life is about. Extremely valuable. And so that's all what it's designed to do. But it isn't the end point. And Christ was very clear about this, that we confuse often the letter of the law with the spirit of the law. We confuse like that we're obeying rules to demonstrate that we're good, as opposed to understanding those are there to teach us how to love. That the aim is love, not obeying the rules. Now, obeying the rules may well help you learn to love, okay? But that's different than making the institution itself or the rules themselves the highest good. That's wrong, and it's not our theology. But human beings do this all the time. They make the institution, the rules, compliance, doing what you're told, more important than the larger issue of integrity, which is a stage 3 place, but a scary place. I mean, I can understand why people like others to obey, as a parent. I understand that, because we want people to do what we believe is right. We want others to do what we think will make the world better. We want people to also replicate us in a way, right? And to tolerate the invalidation of difference, the invalidation of being in a marriage with someone who thinks differently than you, having a child who really is in the world differently than you are, or were, or ever would be, to have church members that believe along the spectrum politically, or have different ideas about LGBTQ issues, and to really all be thrown in together. Okay, that's tough stuff. That's not easy. That is going to push the question of what our lesser selves want is, hey, get in line, think the right things, do things the way you're told, do things like I do them. Look, I'm all more enlightened than the rest of yous, and you should all think like me. Okay, so that's another version of it. Like we may come to church and think that we get it and we get how things are, and we can be just as dogmatic and just as rigid in trying to get other people to think like now the way that we now think. And so pushing people to comply is extremely human and is our lesser selves. I need you to do what makes me feel okay. That's our pursuit of validation, if some of you've heard me talk about this. So when we grow, though, into stage three is what would be self-authoring. So self-authoring, I may be able to come back to some of those questions in a second. Self-authoring is this ability to, in stages 1 and 2, you've internalized, and I want to be really clear about this. You can't just jump into stage 3. No human can do it, and no human ought to do it. It's not like stage 1 and stage 2 are lesser stages. They're necessary building blocks to be capable of living the spirit of the law. So you have to internalize the black and white reality of safe and not safe. This, in some ways, much more primitive, but still very fundamental to functioning in society and foundational to morality. So it's not like it's the wrong stage or black and white is wrong. It's just, it's primitive and it's sort of a foundational layer that you transcend and build upon. Stage 2 becomes more complex. It's what are the social rules? How do we work together? How do we cooperate? What's your job? What's my job? What's your role? What's my role? What are the rules that we're aligning ourselves with to make this work? Okay, more complex and very, very important. Okay, we never want to be in a world that is absent of institutions. We don't want authoritarianism. We don't want a king. We want to have institutions that protect the individual imperfectly always, but still are there, that we are all working together as a collective. But you need to internalize that to be capable of stage 3. And stage 3 allows you, once I remember when we were working with somebody who was giving us some advice in the business, and I had hired a designer to be doing some of the social media stuff. And she wanted to kind of do her own thing. And the person that was advising us was saying, no doing your own thing yet, this is a good person. She's just sort of wanting to kind of just be creative. And the person advising us was saying, no, you got to take it to the basics. She has to understand the brand. She has to understand the image. She has to understand what are the fonts you've used and what are basically internalizing all the rules. Because once you've learned the rules well, then you can break them wisely. That is to say, then you can be creative in a way that's actually functional and allows things to flourish, but not if you just disregard them. She wasn't trying to disregard them. It was just an interesting idea for me because it was kind of like, oh yeah, you need to have these layers that are there because then you can be creative and flexible within a structure, within a kind of foundational understanding of what it is you're trying to create, but not before then. And so when you move into spirit of the law, it's because you really do understand the letter of the law, because you really do understand these foundational principles of society and living well together and how to be fair and how to be concerned about your impact on another person, because then you're able to think wisely and flexibly and attend to the well-being of those that you're in relationship with, as well as be true to yourself. And so but it's a place in which you can belong more to yourself in stage 3, be truer to who you are, but not in this individualistic, rebellious way, but you're being true to the best in you, right? And therefore being true to other people. Or another way of saying it is, as you're really true to the best in other people, you will also be true to the best in yourself. So as you move into stage 3, you're learning how to reference internally more. You're going from an external reference of authority to an internal reference of authority. That's the stage 2 to stage 3 change, but it's a big and terrifying change. And because this external to internal reference is a hard thing to do. And while most of us don't like the idea of being bossed around, in truth, most of us want it. Most of us are afraid of actual, real moral autonomy. And so we'd rather be angry about the, authority figures getting things wrong and either just resenting or rebelling, which is another form of dependency. And that's all understandable. I'm not dismissing that. But to get stuck there is to not grow into the next level of moral responsibility, which is to take upon yourself more the question of what is actually good, what is actually going to create a better world, what is actually my responsibility in this relationship, whether that's to the church, to my spouse, to my child, what is on me. And this is where a deeper relationship to the divine is very helpful. A deeper relationship to our own self-honesty, a deeper ability to act in agency and full responsibility for ourselves, while tolerating that some people will not like what we're doing, thinking, saying, believing, and so on. And yet it is the path of growing into the ability to co-create goodness with God, right? It's the path in being able to fulfill the measure of our individual creation. It's the path of being able to be an agent in the world, not just out of willy-nilly doing what you want, but that you've really internalized moral principles that you then are using to make the world a better place wherever you believe is right for you to be in that moral landscape. And so the questions that are coming in that I will take up here are really in this stage 2 to stage 3 question, the tensions around it. And nothing about this is easy. That is why most people don't ever go to stage 3, because it is really terrifying to lose the validation of people that you want to belong to. It's one thing to like be in an angry rebellion. That is not the same thing. It's one thing to be like, you're such idiots. I don't think this way anymore. You can find a lot of post-Mormon derisive groups, right? I mean, I understand that people can feel angry and misled and have feelings about that. But there's also a kind of pretend morality of sort of being in just a contempt for what you no longer think or believe, which is different than transcending it and growing into a deeper morality and deeper sense of responsibility about how you're going to make the world a better place, how you are going to take deeper responsibility onto yourself. And that's sometimes very hard to do. It also can be hard to just even think for yourself. It's like, I'd rather just, I remember being, when I was an adolescent, I just had a lot more questions than any of my friends had, than my parents had, about the truthfulness of the church. I took the question very, very seriously. Like, I read the scriptures and I prayed and I thought a lot, and there were things that felt wrong to me. And it really scared me that they felt wrong to me, because I wanted so much to belong. This is my group. I mean, this part of the reason I'm still here is because this is my group and I'm not going anywhere. Because Latter-day Saints are my favorite people and they're my people. And they're the people that have loved me and cared about me and have given me a lot of goodness in my life. And so I wanted very much to belong, but I also wanted to belong to my own integrity. I didn't want to be dishonest with myself in order to belong. And so that's the fundamental tension of a stage 2 to stage 3 transition. And so, you know, for a long while, I would do everything I could to just somehow force fit everything in, like or another way I would handle it is like, I'm the idiot. Like people much smarter than me have figured this out. I must be the problem. And those are all good things to do first. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I think that's legit to say like, okay, I don't want to assume that just because it doesn't make sense to me that I'm the right one, because where am I wrong about this is a fair question. But, you know, with time, what was happening for me was I was building more and more confidence to move that locus of control or locus of authority from outside of myself to more deeply inside of myself. And it was deepening my relationship to God. That is, that my reference was a deeper relationship to a God that wanted me to live truthfully more than compliantly. And so that was where I was taking more into myself, which was not an enjoyable process for me. It was a very scary process for me at times, because again, I didn't want people to be afraid of me, reject me, be unhappy with me. And yet I also knew I needed to live honestly with myself. And I'm grateful for all that, because I think it has allowed me to um, anchor my life more deeply into what I honestly think and feel, including all of the good that's in the church, as well as what I think is limitation in the church, all of the good that's in our government, including the limitation that's there, all of the good that's in my own soul, including the limitation there, right? Because it just allows you to start to see more wisely. The evil's not outside of us, it's in us. Goodness is not outside of us, it's in us, it's all there. And being able to discern and see, which is a lifelong, eternity long process, right? You never can fully know yourself, I don't think. But it's still, the more we try to really be honest with ourselves, the more we clean up that internal compass and become more able to be a force for good in the world, because, and more trustworthy, because we are able to be honest. We're able to take responsibility for ourselves. Let me just take this one. How does one come to a place of resolution around the things that feel wrong to me, particularly when those questions or disbeliefs are regularly painted as something we need to just have faith around and do in spite of not feeling good about or accepting? How do we push the I'm reactive about this thing versus this is not something I can accept as truth? Yeah, well, so it's just a process. And you have to make decisions. And I think it can really be helpful to understand that there's nothing strange happening, right? When you're like saying, I don't think I believe that, it gets people upset. I remember talking to my roommate at BYU. I had a cousin who was talking to me privately about the fact that he was gay and also LDS. He was very conflicted about what to do. And I cared about him. I knew how sincere he was. And I was saying to my roommate, like, this, the church's response to this does not seem adequate to me. It doesn't seem adequate to just say, you know, it's somewhere between a sin, or at the time, or you just have to deal. And she didn't like that I was voicing that, because that felt disloyal. It felt unfaithful. And she's kind of like, you know, what do you know? Like, you know, she was nice to me, but she was saying like, you know, the church and church leadership is so much smarter at what's true than you and I are. So kind of, who are you to question it? It was all much kinder than that, but that was the gist of her side of the argument. And I mean, that was for me a fair question. I really had to like figure out like, what, am I wrong? Or is the church wrong? And if the church is wrong, then what does that mean about other things? And again, I would say those moral conflicts are very, very important. Life is full of them. They're always going to be there. And it's easy to just jump in with your group and hold up your banner and just say, this is the right way without actually thinking through it. Thinking through it asks a lot more of us, but this is where we develop morally, to sincerely be asking the question of what is really right and learning how to see limitation in the church without saying that makes the church evil. You know, now they're the bad ones, I'm the good one, or whatever, going into that same black and white thinking, as opposed to that this is an imperfect institution and still a good one and still a valuable one. And I have to sort out my relationship to it and tolerate that other people may be disappointed in me, may fear for me, may feel like they did a bad job because I, didn't turn out the way they wanted, like my mom or something. I was worried about that at the time, that I was going to be a disappointment to her if I didn't accept everything that she had accepted herself. So I don't know if I have a quick answer for you, but to say that those questions are important questions, and they're pressuring the developmental issue of your self-authoring, your self-development, taking the locus of control from outside of you to inside of you. Human beings are puppets. We love to do what our group does. I mean, just look at politics. It's ridiculous. It's like, oh, we believe that. Okay, this is what I believe, and not that many people who want to step into the complexity and think for themselves and then take positions that might get people at the family dinner upset. That's hard work. Nobody likes to do it. And yet we're not going to make it as a society if more people don't do that, right? We're not going to make it if we don't value integrity over compliance or fitting in. So, and so this question of how do we do it? It's a process. And for me, what was very helpful for me is working out my own relationship with God. I remember I'll just speak about my experience. I'm not saying this is how it is for everybody. I just know for me I was in the MTC. I had decided to go on a mission in part because I always had the question in my mind, like, how can I really question things or lay aside any belief if I haven't first tried everything to the fullest of my ability? I don't know all the scriptures. I haven't, fasted over multiple days for a testimony. I mean, I've done a lot of things, but I was like, I don't feel like I have given this everything for me to then feel that I could say no to something if I need to. Excuse me. And so I went on a mission in part as a sacrifice to say to God, like, I am giving everything. So I remember being in the MTC and feeling there was so much pressure to just comply, say the 4 points of testimony, and everybody just seemed to be doing that. And it felt wrong to me. It felt a little like brainwashing. It felt like, I was like being kind of sucked into just stop thinking for yourself. It's all going to be easier if you just do that. Okay. And I remember just being like, oh my goodness, like, God, you got to talk to me here. Like, is this what you want from me? Do you want me to just stop thinking? Are you saying that for me to be good, is this who you are? That I should stop being true to myself and just fold in? And I would say that my mission was an answer to that question. But even in the MTC, I remember thinking, no, like, I can't do that. That is not right. God doesn't want me to lie to myself. God doesn't want me to base my life on something fundamentally dishonest in me, which is different than I was getting everything right. There's things that I have discarded when I was younger in the church that I actually now believe in more. Okay, so that is to say that it doesn't mean that I got everything right. It's that I was trying to get a cleaner internal compass by staying honest, even if fallible. And that's very, very important, because if we're, if we're just not willing to be as honest with ourselves as we can't really trust an internal compass, and we will continue to basically look to others to tell us what to think and who to be. And, a lot of people will leave the church and then they just go find another group to tell them who to think and what to be. as opposed to a deeper internal reference. So, okay. Okay, I just want to read. Becky says, I'm more mature, no purpose, becoming more of an introvert. Church is hard for introverts. Yes. Believe that it will all work out. Belief that it will all work out. I'm not sure exactly what that means. How do you keep going spiritually? Most things are really incomprehensible, but I hold on to hope and faith. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take up some more questions that are very much in that same line that people wrote in, and around this question of being in a crisis and what does it mean for my relationship to the church? So let me just go to those questions. Hang on a second. Okay. This person asked, can I still feel part of the church after my faith remodel? I have no desire to leave the church, but I'm having a hard time feeling like I still belong after my beliefs have changed so much. I feel like if the members of my ward knew what my current beliefs are about issues such as the church's truth claims, polygamy, LGBTQ issues, etc., I would no longer be welcome. Yeah. So again, this is right at the heart of the issue of differentiation. And yeah, if you're going to look to other people around the question of am I welcome, you're going to find people who would say no, you're not. You know, I don't want to hear what you think. I don't want the complexity. I like my way of thinking. So I don't want to hear about your way of thinking. Again, I know I keep bringing up politics because it's so close to my heart right now. But part of our problem in society is that people can go to the news sources that reinforce the worldview they have already. And so they're not in the blessing of being in a ward where you're forced to kind of consider and reconcile very different thinking of other good people. Because if you can just keep getting reinforcement, it makes you stupid, because you just keep getting the same idea and you double down into your idea and you don't realize how impaired the thinking is. And that's what's happening in society. And then it justifies the division. It makes you like, oh, those idiots over there, they think such stupid things. So yes, if you're going to wait for the group to tell you you're welcome, you might wait a long time, because we don't like dissent. We don't like difference. It's uncomfortable. And because it pushes us to grow. Because if we're going to do what Christ told us to do, which is to love one another, well, me loving you is to know you and to know in what ways you are different than me, and the ways that you think differently than I do, and how you came to the conclusions that you did. And that process of caring about somebody is going to stretch your soul. It doesn't mean that you'll come to think like they think necessarily, but it's going to at least make you really think about what really matters. Okay. Can I love this person who's grown up in a different situation, has had different life experiences that has led them to these conclusions, just as I have had the same and have been led to different conclusions? But how do we make room for each other? That's the soul work of a ward. That's the soul work of love. Okay. And so this idea of like, oh my gosh, I don't think the same way, and now people are not going to like me. And believe me, I know these feelings. I used to like go to ward parties and try to convince people to think like me, which never went well. Also because I was mad that people didn't think more like me, because I didn't want to lose my belonging. And so I think they could feel my anger in the things I was saying. Yeah, I think in a way you can understand that I want that, and I'm upset that I can't have that, but I'm not going to get it here. Now, I don't mean to say that you're not going to find any friends at church, or that if you do speak more honestly, there's been times where I've spoken up in a Relief Society meeting, and I can even speak about how I think is a good way to do that, but shared what I honestly thought, and my heart's kind of racing because I know that I'm sort of speaking something that generally is not spoken. And then I've had people that I wouldn't have ever expected write me a note, thanking me, come up to me after the meeting and thank me for speaking something that has been true in their life, that they had never had felt so alone around. And so that is to say, when you have the courage to go and be invested in the church community, and be a truthful, self-secure person. Okay, well, now I might be like, I can't do that. I don't know how to be self-secure. But if you can believe that God wants you to be honest, okay, well, you will make the world a better place, not because you've got all the answers, but because you are bringing more truth into the conversation. Now, going back to this person's question, I have no desire to leave, but I'm having a hard time feeling like I still belong. There's the difference between fitting in and belonging, okay, which we can talk about. And Brené Brown talks about that idea a little bit. But the question of I have no desire to leave, that's a very, very important statement, and one for you to really sort out. Why? What is the reason that I want to stay? And if it's for social approval and it's just to keep people happy with you, it's a thin reason, and it might not last very long. It may not weather very well. If it's something deeper than that, there's a lot of good here. It's a community I care about. I want it for my children, or aspects of it for my children. This is a place I can care about other people. You want to get a hold of the why. What is the reason that it matters to me to be here? Because that's going to be very important in the self-defining process, and the thing that will stabilize you when you don't feel that you're getting validation for who you are. Belonging, it comes through honesty. Because if you just try to say what people want to hear from you so you fit in, you don't ever actually feel like you belong, because you think if they actually knew me, they wouldn't accept me. And I'm not saying that you need to say everything at all times, and that I definitely don't think that. But I think, can I share more of who I actually am? And I think that where people sometimes go wrong in church meetings and so on is, or in any group, is they're trying to become a missionary to get the person at the Thanksgiving table to understand the rightness of their political view. It just goes badly, right? It goes really badly because they have an overt or covert agenda to get you to think like them. And nobody likes that. People will put up their, they'll resist. But if you lose any objective of trying to get people to think like you, and instead you just speak honestly about, loving the group themselves, loving people for where they are, having compassion for where people are, and knowing that you were there too at one point, right? And now you're in a different place, and being able to just speak about, for me, this has been true. For me, this has not been a belief that has been helpful for me, or for me, this was painful. You're speaking about your experience without an agenda to make other people validate it, but also daring to speak truthfully and put more truth on the table. That helps people. That helps people think more. It helps them to consider their own beliefs. It helps them to think about, it makes it easier for them to love you, even if they think you're whacked for how you think, okay? Because they at least see you as a good person, even if you've got wacky ideas, okay? So that's okay, but that it builds bridges. It builds understanding, and it builds cooperation in the complexity of any church community. When we demand compliance or we demand uniformity, and families, this is also true, it makes the system brittle and weak. And so even though difference stresses us out, it makes us stronger. The diversity makes us stronger because it allows us to be wiser and broader in our thinking and more flexible to solve problems and to attend to the collective. Okay, this person writes, I'm currently going through a faith expansion while my husband remains completely committed to the LDS Church. This has caused friction in our marriage. Because he feels like I've broken promises and covenants that he feels our marriage was based on. My feelings and love for him haven't changed. So how do I help him see I'm completely committed to him and our marriage, when to him, my not subscribing to the church 100% feels like a betrayal of our marriage? So first of all, I would say I believe that it feels like a betrayal, because he thought when he got married, it was going to be one thing. And it has turned out that marrying a whole person who is different than you didn't give him the guarantee that he wanted. And so I understand the feeling, but I don't agree with him that it's a betrayal. It's a betrayal when you're dishonest with somebody. When you tell, if you say, oh yeah, I'm a full believer and you know you're not, and then you get married and then you say, actually, I'm not, or, oh, I want to have 8 children and you know you don't, but you know your partner does, and you say that to get them to marry you, and then you say, you know what, I actually don't want to have any children. Okay, that's a betrayal. That's a betrayal because you know one thing and you exploit with the withholding of information to get someone to do what you want, and then you reveal that information. That's betraying. But to evolve, to change your mind, to change how you think, that is not a betrayal. That's a part of the risk of marrying somebody who is their own person. And so, so while I believe that I've worked with lots of couples that where one has had a faith crisis, and the other one has not. And those feelings run deep. And so I'm not dismissing them. They're hard. There's this real identity challenge that I thought we were going to be one thing, and now we're not able to be that. And that's really painful for me. I thought that we were going to go on a mission together. I thought we were going to go to work in the temple together. And now all of these ideas about who we would be are no longer possible unless I divorce you and try to go find somebody else that wants that. And maybe I would do that and then they would change their mind, right? So it's not easy stuff. And it's also not easy because so often what we believe, we believe it through the collective belief. And so when a spouse goes through a faith crisis, it pressures us more to figure out, what do I believe? What do I stand by? What do I think? And that can be its own deeply disorienting question. And if I'm going to stay, how to say, if my spouse is going to stop believing while I believe, or I'm going to believe less than my spouse does, there's going to be some level of separateness between us. And am I prepared for that? Okay, so these are not easy things. So I just want to be clear, but that's different than you've hurt me. It hurts, but that's different than you hurt me. And so it also, I think, I've found in working with couples that a lot of times the idea is like, if you made a commitment to me in the temple and you don't believe in the temple anymore, well, then the commitment is null and void, isn't it? Like, meaning if you don't have those covenants as the thing that's keeping you doing this, then it's open season, isn't it? Like, isn't it true that you could just go anywhere, because it feels like if it's not coming externally, there's no way it could be internal. And I think people that for whom their morality still is quite external, it's very hard for them to understand that their spouse may have a deeper internal authority and are still going to be true to the marriage, still committed, still love their spouse. So how do I prove it? I think the way you prove it is by being it and saying, I love you enough to continue to be honest with you. I love you enough that I want this marriage, this relationship, even in our differences. And you, spouse, may not feel that way. You, spouse, may choose differently, but that's what I desire. And this is where I am. And I want to still build a bridge between these two realities. The way you prove it is just through your behavior, but it is a period of a lot of turmoil and disruption. And so it's understandable that, I don't know why I think this is a he. Did you say he? Somehow, yeah, he feels, yeah. That, it's a period of a lot of turmoil, and he may well be in a lot of reactivity, for at least for a little while. There's groups like Maradona Tightrope. There may be others that are there to kind of help couples that are in very much in these kinds of questions and challenges. Okay, I'm just going to check in here. I've kind of been on this page. I want to see how y'all are doing here. Christy, are there any questions that feel important that have been related to what I'm saying? Anything?
They're all good questions. Yes.
Yeah. No, there's the stupid ones. Yeah,
Yeah.
just kidding.
I took out all the stupid ones. There's only good ones left.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I like that one.
Well, but okay, I just want to make sure no one's asking for me to clarify anything. So
No,
what
no
I'll do
clarification.
is still do one more before I have to jump off right at the hour because I have another meeting. But let me just pull up one more here. Okay. Oh, I'm just trying to think which one to do. Nice and short one, but there's not very many short ones. Let's see. I'm going to do this one. I'm stuck in the anger phase. It's so lonely as none of my loved ones will try to understand me. I find myself still struggling to self-define in a room full of loved ones that think I'm in error. That's very hard. It's very hard. And that will drive a lot of anger. The LDS culture feels so enmeshed and won't let me leave with dignity. It feels really personal to me as my character feels in question now. Yes, but I'm still me. I just have a different belief of who God is and how he operates. Why is that so bad? Yeah. Right. Okay. So, yes. And, you know, a lot of times the reason why people have a lot of anger at the church is less about the church per se. I mean, no, maybe it is, but I'm just saying it's often about how their family is relating to them around their shift in belief. And if the person whose belief has shifted feels like my family's loyalty is to the church and the church is complicit in keeping them loyal to them and I'm out, that's going to drive a lot of anger. Okay. Because you know, I don't get to be honest and true to myself and still be loved. I don't get to belong if I'm more honest. That's a very, very painful thing. And it's a betrayal of love on the part of the group. I do remember when I had, you know, a couple of brothers who I have a big family of 5 brothers, but 2 of them were in a faith crisis at slightly different times, but still like in a way that was very stressful for me because I worried about the fabric of the family. I was a middle child, but I was sort of watching some of these things. I worried, like, was their disbelief going to disrupt the family's cohesiveness? Was it going to disrupt my belief? Was it going to hurt mom and dad? Right. And so my first response was like, freeze them out. It wasn't quite that bad, but, you know, a little bit like, uh, you're doing the wrong things and you're destructive. And so I want to protect by not taking you seriously. I mean, I, in my own integrity, grew out of that because I could tell that it was based in fear and it was not loving and it wasn't fair. But I think some families can really get stuck in that. And then sometimes what happens to the one who feels shut out is that they get to be missionaries in their own right. They're trying to convince their family that they have legit views. And I understand it. Believe me, I've done all these things myself. But then the more you're trying to get them, the more they're putting up the walls, right? And so you can get into a power struggle around protecting one's sense of identity. And again, this goes right to the core of differentiation. We need to close out our child because their disbelief feels like a threat to us or to our other kids or to our grandkids. And so we need to basically be at arm's length. And it really, really hurts. Like you're going to choose your ideology over loving me. I think that's a failure to live what Christ taught. I think Christ taught us that love is more important than ideology, that caring about other people is the whole point. And if your faith isn't strong enough to love another person, it's a weak faith, right? It's not worth its salt. Your faith has to tolerate loving other honest, earnest souls. It doesn't mean you need to believe what everybody else thinks, but you need to be able to put aside judgment enough and put aside the demand to have everything reinforce your worldview enough to care about this other person. So for the person that's on the receiving side of that, I think what I would do is, rather than the impulse to go and make a life of validation sort of outside of the family. I mean, you may need to, okay? It may need be that your family won't budge. But I think the stronger path is to understand what the family's going through and why they're doing what they're doing, which is less about you and more about their fear. And to continue to kind of show the underbelly, not the defensive ideological struggle, but rather it's very painful for me to honestly believe differently, not because I'm indulgent, not because I want to do drugs, not because but because I'm being sincere that I don't see things as I used to, and that I feel so little acceptance. That is very, very painful for me. And the reason is because that's intimate. You're sharing your honesty. You're talking about their impact. And it pushes them up against their own claimed principles, right? Like, I'm hurting my son, I'm hurting my daughter, I'm hurting my sister. Can I grow? Because this is also a family that also needs to grow. And it doesn't mean you'll all come to the same conclusion, but there'll be more flexibility. There'll be more room to really accept each other and learn from each other. When during COVID, like many families, our family did church online, and we just would go around, and each sibling, or someone in their family of the sibling, would present, give a talk, and so on. And the thing that was so cool about it is that some of the group are atheists, some are devout. There's a whole spectrum of belief and non-belief in the family. And yet there was a remarkable amount of kind of goodwill of hearing, and especially because these were not about, this is how you should think and feel, but this is what has meant a lot to me. This is what is something that has helped me in my life. It was much more in that frame of why this principle or idea or concept has blessed my life. And you can learn a lot from each other in that, and build bridges when you're not trying to get people to be like you, but you're showing them who you are. In my Strengthening Your Relationship course, in talking about conflict, right? Talking about places of difference in a marriage, we're often trying to control and convince and prevail ideologically. Again, very natural man of us, very much what our lesser minds want to do. The harder thing, but the thing that actually allows us to build a marriage or a family environment in which we get to belong to ourselves and to each other, is to learn to speak more intimately, to reveal. This for me has been a valuable thing. This for me has been a hard thing. This is what I have learned. I'm not professing I have all the answers, but this is honestly where I am in this path. That's a way of strengthening the collective, is being true to who you are while allowing others the same. That's the hard moral work of love, but it's also what makes families stronger, wards stronger, society stronger, right? It's what we need. It's the work Christ asked us to do. It's difficult, and so we tend to regress to Sadducees and Pharisees, because it feels so much better to judge and to tell other people who to be than to grow into somebody who can make room for another person. Okay, everybody, thanks so much, and I will talk to you next month.